I've learned from DNFs and how I'd like to never ever have it happen ever again, because it sucks and it's awful. Hi and welcome back to Running Rants with Helen. As you can see, this is another edition of walking rants, potentially sitting rants. I'm 1 week removed from Tarawera and still not running, so we just thought I would do this episode walking. And I'm here in New Zealand still, near Mount Maunganui, just a little bit further down the coast. I've been observing a hermit crab massacre. There are shells everywhere, and the seagulls, they fall out and the seagulls are just eating them. It's been crazy. But today I mostly wanted to talk about DNFs and like kind of my opinion and when I think it's a good idea to finish a race, and then like probably when it's a bad idea to finish a race, kind of like I talked about in my last video. This is just the first time since 2023 where I've actually finished a race over 50K, so that was pretty exciting. Can we show them all the shells? See, and there's little guys. Like that guy, he's half gone, but then I don't know. Okay, see that guy, and they just crawl out and then they get eaten.
That one's crawling. Here.
Hey, do you see him? Oh, okay. But then also like, oh, that guy's just like my shadow. That guy's just like a sluggy guy. Some of them are sluggy guys and some of them have a lot of legs. Oh yeah, look at him go. That guy's crawling. I feel like they can't crawl without the water. So yeah, that's what we're working with. I'm drinking this fizzy drink. It's lovely, it's summer, I'm happy to be here. My toes are like pretty much good. I don't even think you would guess that I ran 100K, so that's cool. But yeah, getting back to the topic, it is like, yeah, DNFs. And I was kind of inspired by this because Tara Dower just started a podcast with her friend Arlie, and she asked me to send in my first DNF story. And so I think I kind of wanted to talk about that and just what I've learned from DNFs and how I'd like to never ever have it happen ever again, because it sucks and it's awful. I think a big thing that plays into DNFs is like maybe you just shouldn't have started the race. And I think that has been a couple of my situations. Like the first race I DNF'd was Mexico by UTMB in 2022. And I probably just shouldn't have started that race. I think like, I don't know, I could get into it, but essentially it was the first year of the UTMB World Series, and so they set out an application where you could get support if you didn't have a sponsor, and I didn't at that point, and you could choose any of the races around the world. And I really wanted to go to Speed Goat, but one of my coworkers at the gear shop I was working at, she was like, you can't just go to Utah. You have the opportunity to go any of these places. You can't just choose Utah. And so I was like, yeah, you're probably right. And so like last minute, I added Mexico on that list. So I was like, oh, that would be cool. I love Mexico. That could be fun. And I got chosen for Mexico, which I was so excited about. But it was at the end of October, and I learned the previous year after my first 100K that I just didn't want to, I wanted to end my season with 100K and not continue to train after that, just because the first year I was so tired. But then I got into this race for free and I had support, so I was like, well, I have to do this. And so I think I just probably shouldn't have gone, but regardless, I did. And Up until this point, I had only run with a headlamp twice. One of the times was a training run for CCC, and the other time was actually during CCC, where I was alone, so it didn't really matter. And so we started the race at like 7 a.m., but the sun didn't rise until 8:30. So we're in the dark, and that's when I learned if you don't have the brightest headlamp out of anyone else, you actually just can't see. And so I like couldn't see anything. We're running on this trail, but like trail's a very loose term. They kept saying how cool it was that we got to like run in this place because it was all private property, and so no one ever gets to run there, which I also then came to the realization like that probably means that there isn't really a trail, and there wasn't. It literally felt like someone had gone through the day before like with a machete and just like cut through the jungle. And so like 5 miles in, I fell down a hill. I like tripped, ate shit, and screamed because I thought I broke my ankle. And I like got up to try to run again, like immediately fell back down, and like a bunch of people stopped, and one of the guys, he's actually a vet, he stopped and like helped me wrap my ankle, and I was like, okay, maybe I'll be able to run. I still couldn't run, and then I realized like the closest way back was to go to the like previous aid station, which was still like 2 miles away. And I didn't have any service, so like I couldn't call the race. And so I was just like hysterically crying, like walking through the field, and like the entire field. And people were so nice, but like more than one person had offered to like turn around with me and walk and like give up their race, which is like absolutely crazy. But I eventually got a hold of the race, and they're like, okay, we'll send someone to come get you. And so I'm like walking through the jungle crying, and this little tiny dog runs up to me in the middle of the jungle. I thought it was so funny. I have a video, I don't know, I'll see if I can insert it, but it's literally like me sobbing and then this little dog and like me hobbling. And then this guy on an ATV picks me up. We're like ripping through the jungle on all like these private roads, and he could obviously see that like I was very upset because I was still crying, and I think he was trying to make me feel better, and so he kept offering like, do you want to drive? And I was like, no, I do not want to drive, but thank you. And then I'm like crying on like the back of this, and I'm like, yeah, it's so pretty, because you could like see the sunrise over the town, so like it was very pretty, but I just wasn't really having it.
Nice view.
Yeah, it's very pretty here. So then he took me down to the road, and there was an ambulance, and then they drove me to the med tent at the race, and the doctor there was convinced I broke my ankle. I was certain I hadn't, because I'm like, man, I walked 2 miles, like I don't think it's broken. But then they made me go to the emergency room, and yeah, it wasn't broken. I got x-rays. My whole like emergency room visit plus like 2 ambulance rides only ended up being like $300. So that was actually a pretty good deal. And yeah, then I went home. And that was the first time I DNF'd. I don't know, I think if maybe that had happened at like mile 28, I probably would have walked the last 3 miles, because that would have been like the only way. But 5 miles in, that definitely wasn't going to happen. And I think looking back on it, like I said, I just shouldn't have run that race. You can't just run a race because you get in for free or because people pay you to go. And so like after the fact, I'm like, yeah, of course that happened. Like, why wouldn't I almost break my ankle in the jungle in Mexico if my like intentions behind going to that race weren't aligned with what I value? So yeah, that was a bummer. I feel like emotionally I was very sad during it. Like I could not stop crying. But afterwards, I feel like that one didn't take much time to get over. It was like, yeah, okay, that happened and it's fine. And then 2023, it went great. I finished every race that I started, which I'd like to keep that going in future years. That's also how 2025 is going to be, so super excited for that. 2024, I started 2 races that were over 50K, and I did not finish either of them. And I feel like that emotionally was really hard. I feel like it kind of, like, I feel like typically I'm pretty confident in my running, but I feel like it kind of hits your confidence of like, can I literally even do this? Like, I get that these are different situations and it's not like the same thing keeps happening, but it feels like something keeps happening and I just haven't been able to handle it well enough to be able to continue, which it just feels really bad. So that the first race of the year that I didn't finish was Transvulcania, which is like 45 miles on the island of La Palma, which is a Canary island, and I was so excited to be there. I think I only made it maybe 11, 12 miles. I was kind of like dealing with some Achilles stuff going into that race and like thought it had been managed enough, but race day kind of aligned with like a bad Achilles day, and I don't think running like fast uphill in sand was good. And at first, like, my Achilles hurt, like both of them hurt, and I was like, well, that's fine, like I can run 45 miles in this much pain. But then it like turned into like nerve pain that like went all the way up my legs into my low back. And so once again was walking up this hill crying, and I had crew at mile 17, so my plan was just to walk there. But I like ran into some medical people and they were like, no. And so then I had to walk somewhere else in the forest, and then they drove me somewhere. And yeah, I feel like emotionally that was just really hard because it turns into like a lot of what ifs. And like I knew that day, like it didn't make sense for me to keep running because I think like it would have caused a lot more harm than good. But yeah, like maybe I shouldn't have even started that race. Like I thought I was fine, but I obviously wasn't. Big sad. But once again, I feel like I learned from that, and it actually pushed me to do something about my Achilles. Like I started going to physical therapy and doing little exercises and like all of these things that ultimately led me to actually healing it and getting better. Because sometimes I feel like with injuries, I have good luck with doing nothing and then it just gets better. Yeah, that was a bummer too. I don't think I should have kept running during that race, but I don't think I wish I had. But it still just sucks. I don't know, I feel like we get praises for like listening to our bodies and like it was like the right thing, but I feel like it still just doesn't feel that way to me, because I think when we go into these races, we know it's going to be a hard time, and then it's like, oh, it got harder than I thought, now I'm gonna stop. But it's like the whole point of you being there, I think, like at least for me in the right mindset, is like to have a hard time. And then yeah, it's just like not the heart I expected, so then I quit, I guess. I don't know. That was, yeah, bummer. And maybe that's something that like I just need to work on, is like figuring out like, okay, it's not the heart I expected, that doesn't mean I can't work through it. And I guess that's exactly what happened at UTMB. Once again, maybe shouldn't have started that race, but at some point you're already, I've like talked about this in other videos, but like at some point you're already in France and you're not going to not run the race when you've been there for like 5.5 weeks. And that one, like, I was so sleepy. I've never started a race at 6 p.m. and I was like falling asleep probably like after 50K, and like my feet and my hips hurt so bad after 50K, which I thought was crazy because I've run enough 50Ks that normally I don't feel that bad, like that early. And then I got to Courmayeur, which is 50 miles in. I really wanted to drop there, but we were like, okay, well, the sun's gonna come up, so like it has to get better. You have to like stop falling asleep on the trail. It did in fact not get better. It's actually kind of funny. All of my race photos from like the race organization are me just like crying. And so I got to like past our Nuva, which is mile 62, and I ended up talking to my coach, and I was like, no, I'll walk to Champagne Lock. And then he's like, wait, like how far? I think it was maybe another 15 miles. And he's like, or you could just like turn around and walk a mile back to the aid station. And so I did. And then actually like I dropped out, and everyone was like so surprised. Like at the aid station, they're like, you're fine. I was like, no, I'm not though. But I guess I kind of was. And then I fell asleep. Well, I called Jacob and Rick and told them where I was and that my phone was gonna die. And then my phone did die, and I fell asleep on the side of the road. And they couldn't find me for a minute, which is actually like pretty funny. But that one was really hard too. I feel like, I don't know, even if a race goes good or bad, you like still put all of that work into it. And I feel like not finishing it just, I keep saying it, but like it just feels so bad. And I think like something that I've needed to learn too is, and I think I'm still working on this, it's like, even if I had finished like 600th at UTMB, which I would be shocked if there were even 600 women in that race, but it doesn't matter. Like, you're the only person who remembers. And so even if like maybe you feel embarrassed by the result, literally no one is going to remember, and you're probably going to get more out of finishing than like dropping for whatever reason. Like looking back, I think that there are things that I could have done at UTMB to kind of mitigate it. Like I could have stopped and slept. I could have stopped and like drank an actual coffee. But I think when you're that tired, like I didn't have those problem solving skills in those moments when I could have used them. And yeah, I've like talked about it, but I just got really attached to the outcome. And then when it wasn't going the way that I had envisioned it, I like didn't have a good enough reason to keep running, which is a bummer. And I feel like not, I mean, it's one of those things where looking back, I understand why I dropped, but like, I don't know that it's like a decision that I'm necessarily proud of. Because I get like the whole like, okay, like listening to your body or the signs that you're being given, but like no matter what happens in your race, like we are ignoring these signs all the time that like we should stop. And so like it's kind of about ignoring those like when we're supposed to. I guess like there are a lot of valid reasons to DNF. I think Mexico was a pretty valid reason. I guess Transvulcania was. I don't really know if UTMB was, but I don't know. I think maybe we learn what we're supposed to, whether or not we finish. But I think I'm going to not be doing that anymore. That was kind of one of my main goals with Carawera, was like finishing no matter what. And I mean, I say that, but also they weren't going to let you leave like the 58K aid station if you didn't have a headlamp and some of the other mandatory gear. And I didn't pack that in a drop bag, so I was assuming I was going to make it to 58K before 2 p.m. And I guess if I hadn't, then I probably would have dropped, but luckily that wasn't the situation. So it was fine, and I did finish. Yeah, I think I'm done with the whole DNF thing. I think it feels way worse than like maybe having a result that you're not super proud of.
So you've done a mix of races over the last few years, but you've also done a lot of UTMB series races. And on the elite end of things, your index score plays in quite a bit to the advantages or disadvantages you might have on race day. Can you talk about that and how a DNF might or might not affect that score and those privileges?
Yeah, I mean, at UTMB, I like got a car pass, which made crewing way easier. And I was on the actual start line instead of like one corral back, which I think has its advantages. I think those are like the main things. Or like when I was at CCC the year before, I got a car pass, which I also think, once again, is super helpful. Because I think if my crew had had to take the buses, like I would have missed them, which is bad. Yeah, and I think it's crazy. I do not understand how the UTMB index score works. I kind of talked about that in a past video, how I feel like it's pretty pyramid schemey, but they don't, like if you DNF, it doesn't impact your score at all, which I think it should, honestly. Like, I don't know, but also finishing like way in the back is gonna like take an impact to your score too. But also at the end of the day, like, is my score what I value, or is like feeling good about the effort that I put in more important? And I think that's more important. Like, I could not imagine that being my reason of like, oh, I'm gonna DNF and I'm not gonna try to stick this out just because it might negatively impact my UTMB index. Like, that feels absolutely bonkers to me. But I'm sure like maybe someone out there takes that into consideration. But I personally think that's super dumb.
When do you make the call to either DNS a race or start a race, maybe even if you have some sort of niggle or something going on with your body?
Dude, I don't know. I feel like you have to be, if you have a coach, like you need to be super honest with them. And I don't think I was like being super honest with Rick about my Achilles until that whole thing happened. So I think that's part of it, because I don't know, sometimes with injuries, I feel like I'm kind of in denial, and then it's like, oh, I can't walk. So that's bad. Yeah, I don't really know. I think that I have DNS some races and it was probably a good call. Mostly just broken arrow last year, I guess, which was after Transvulcania. I think at this point, I would rather not start a race than not finish a race. But I don't know, I think sometimes you have the hope. You're like, maybe it'll work out, maybe the adrenaline, maybe whatever, like it'll all culminate, so it's fine. But I don't think it normally is. And sometimes, like I said, you're already in France and you're not gonna not try. But it does take an emotional toll. And I'm like, I don't know, I will get over it, but like, I'm still sad about not finishing that race.
Do you think the level of runner you are matters at all when it comes to thinking about DNFs? Like, for you, a DNF might mean saving your legs for another day, and then for someone like me, it might make sense to kind of finish at all costs because I have nothing to lose.
So first of all, I think we're pretty similar level runners, honestly. But also I always hate that thing of like saving your legs for another day, because like that other day isn't what you committed to when you signed up. And I get that things might not go right, but I don't think that means like not giving it your all. I mean, I guess that doesn't mean you didn't give it your all, but I just think that there's something to be gained from finishing a race, even if like it's not going that well. Obviously there are certain reasons like why you should for sure DNF. Like if you're going to cause permanent damage to your body, like why would you do that? For a silly finishing a result, like a race result, like it doesn't make sense to me either. But I don't think that it's like valid for like, oh, another day, because you're never guaranteed that other day either. And I think that there's value from like suffering through whatever you committed to. I don't think that it changes. Maybe like some elites view it differently, but yeah, I don't know. I think it feels bad whether or not you're at the front, middle, or the back of the race, like, and that we all have something to gain from like those really hard times out there. Maybe like if you didn't pay for a race, then like you have less commitment to it, or you're able to sign up for another one if you're a pro and like you don't have another job and you don't need to take the time off of work. But yeah, I don't think it's any different no matter where you are. This has been the Walking on the Beach edition of Running Rants with Helen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.